It's like a flavor bomb. Hello, my name is Amelia, and today I am going to show you guys how to make the best pasta dish ever. It is chicken Big Mamou on pasta, and it is a recipe by Paul Prudhomme, who is a New Orleans chef. He died, I think, about 7 years ago. He had a restaurant called Paul's in New Orleans, and he's amazing. He's super flavorful, all of his recipes. And this recipe is out of Chef Paul Prudhomme's Louisiana kitchen. He's got a lot of really amazing recipes in here. I'm gonna make a meatloaf at some point that's like beyond. I've always called this dish Mamou chicken. The official title is Chicken Big Mamou. Mamou chicken's easier. This dish has 3 sticks of butter, tons of seasoning, lots of cayenne. If you don't like cayenne, you could probably take it down a couple of notches of the amount of cayenne that you use. It's super buttery, super spicy. And then I'm also making cornbread. It's a Jiffy cornbread, but I add sugar in it and I sprinkle sugar on top. It's delicious. I actually call it CornCAKE because it's so sugary and you can't stop eating it. So today we're making chicken mamou with my Jiffy corn cake. So let's get started. I'm gonna just add the Jiffy mix into a bowl. And I'm doing dry ingredients first, so I add, again, a cup of sugar. If that is too extravagant for you, you could either reduce it to a half a cup or a quarter cup, or you could just not do it at all and you could just do a normal original Jiffy recipe. But again, this is really delicious. And this is 2/3 cup of whole milk. And then 2 eggs. And I'm stirring it just until it's mixed. And I just grab a little bit of butter and a paper towel and use that to grease the dish. I'm gonna pour this into the pan. And then my final step is another little fun, excessive thing to do, but I like to sprinkle a little bit of sugar on top so that it's slightly crunchy and just extra sweet. In the chicken seasoning, I used 2 teaspoons of salt versus the 1.5 tablespoons that the original recipe calls for because I'm using salted butter. If you want to follow the recipe to a T, use unsalted butter, and in the chicken seasoning mix, use 1.5 tablespoons of salt. Also, with the cayenne in the chicken seasoning and in the seasoning mix, the recipe calls for 1.25 teaspoons in both. I used a heaping 1.5 teaspoons in both. The cayenne can definitely be tailored to your personal spice preference. So now we have the seasoning mix fully mixed and the chicken seasoning mix fully mixed. Another modification I made to the recipe is that I used all thigh meat versus breast and thigh meat because I prefer dark meat, but you can use whichever you like. And now that I have all of my thigh meat cut up into 1-inch cubes, I'm gonna sprinkle the chicken seasoning mix on top and then just thoroughly mix it in, and then I'm gonna refrigerate this while I do everything else. Until I need to use it. And just mix it until each piece is thoroughly coated, and we're gonna stick this in the fridge. And the cornbread is out of the oven, and you can see that it's got a little bit of a caramelized top. Not all of the sugar dissolved and melted, but that's okay. And it's gonna have kind of like a fudgy corn, super sweet texture. I love this cornbread mix. Now I'm going to boil some water and cook the pasta, and I'm gonna do this at the beginning just because I'm gonna need to use this pot again for the tomato sauce. So I'm gonna add some salt and bring it to a boil. Here's the green onions. I just love the ombre colors of green and green onions. It's gorgeous. And the cornbread is done and it's cooled a little bit, but it's really delicious and dense, and then the sugary crust is amazing. This is actually very addicting, and I would say it rivals pretty much all cornbread because it's corn cake and it is hard to stop eating. The recipe calls for 4 medium-sized garlic cloves peeled, and then also 2 teaspoons of minced garlic, but I'm just gonna mince all of the garlic and use it that way. But if you want to follow the directions, it's 4 garlic cloves peeled and then 2 teaspoons of minced garlic. Alright, I'm turning this on medium heat and I am melting 1.5 sticks of butter. And once the butter is melted, I'm just going to add my onions and also the minced garlic. And I'm just going to let this cook for about 5 minutes. Now I'm going to add the seasoning mix, and then I'm going to cook the onions until they're brown, about 8 to 10 minutes. Two tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. And then a heaping tablespoon of Tabasco style sauce. And then I'm going to bring this to a simmer, which will be about 8 minutes. Okay, now I just added the tomato sauce, so I'm going to bring the mixture to a boil. Alright, now that it's boiling, I'm going to add the 2 tablespoons of sugar and also half of the green onions, which, since I'm using more green onions than the recipe calls for, that's probably like 2.5 cups or 2 cups that I'm using, but the recipe calls for 1 cup of green onions to be added right now. And now we're just gonna gently simmer this uncovered for about 40 minutes. And while the sauce is simmering, I am going to start cooking the chicken portion, which calls for 1.5 sticks of butter that I'm gonna melt. And if 3 sticks of butter is a little too much for you when you're cooking this recipe, you can cut the amount of butter in half. I think the butter is what makes this recipe so beyond divine and delicious, but you could definitely cut all of this in half, and maybe even more so, but like, let's not get crazy. I'm gonna add the remaining green onions and cook these on high for about 3 minutes. All right, I'm gonna add the chicken now. The seasoned chicken. This has been cooking for about 10 minutes, so I'm going to turn this off. In about 10 minutes, I'm going to add the chicken and all of the butter and the green onions to the sauce. And then I'm going to also spatula any little bit of butter and chicken flavor that's left in the pan. And I'm gonna add it to this dish. Because that's the good stuff. And I'm just gonna stir this. The Mamou chicken sauce is complete. And honestly, this is super buttery. It's a really impressive tomato pasta dish that you can cook for your friends, and they will be wowed if they like spicy food. It's like so good. It seems at first like a normal tomato pasta dish, but it's so much more. And there's a ton of green onions in this, and I actually added more. So good.